So last night, as scheduled, I gave my talk at Georgia Tech in the lead up to the NCAA Women's Swimming Championship, where a biological male will compete against and dominate the females. I wanted to explain why this was wrong, but I wasn't there just to talk about women's sports. I was, there to talk about, and the whole speech is available on my YouTube channel. As you'll see, if you watch it, our discussion went far beyond sports and into issues surrounding language, biology, logic, basic fundamental truths of life, all these sorts of things. At one point in the speech, I spent about 5 minutes talking about what the words male and female mean and explaining that men cannot have babies. And it occurred to me as I was getting into this part of the speech how sad and deeply tragic it is that we've reached a point in society where a podcaster without a college degree has to go to colleges and give basic biology lessons. But that's where we are, and that's where I was last night. Of course, there were many students at the school who did not want me there. And as we talked about yesterday, the local Antifa chapter collaborated with the leftists at the school to try and sabotage the event. Based on what they were posting on the internet, it seems that there was an attempt to reserve a bunch of the tickets ahead of time, preventing people who wanted to actually attend from being able to attend. But that plan proved futile, as there was a line stretching around the building to get into the event. And we ended up having a packed house, and it was a great event. The wannabe saboteurs were mostly crowded out of the room by the Sweet Baby Gang, which showed up in great numbers. That didn't stop one guy from making an attempt anyway. About a minute or two into my speech, he stood up on his desk with a rather bizarre sign. And I think that we were talking about this afterwards, and it seems as though he thought that some other leftists would join him in this demonstration. I don't think he thought he'd be the only one, but I'm guessing they coordinated this ahead of time and said, okay, we're all going to stand up early in the speech and make a big thing. But nobody else did. It was only him. So we all just ended up having a good laugh at his expense while he was ushered out of the room rather quickly. But it was a lot of fun. It was good moments. Let's watch that. Here it is.
But the most important thing to establish for our purposes today is that he is a man. He is a he. And that will never change. That won't change no matter what kind of poster you hold. Doesn't change that fact. At least the poster's laminated, because I saw some posters out there. I appreciate the effort. I saw some protesters out there were holding signs on loose leaf paper. It's like, come on. This guy, he took the time to laminate that thing with whatever that is, and I really appreciate it. Like he had to go down to Office Space, or he had to go down to Staples with that thing. All right. Anyway. Leah Thomas is a man. Back to the subject in hand here.
Yeah, I did appreciate the lamination on the sign. I mean, he obviously took a certain pride in the work, and I commend him for that. But he did make a few mistakes, like typing the letters in white with a pink background, making it difficult to read what the sign actually said. The sign apparently made some kind of reference to, quote, femboy furry porn. Now, I don't know what that is. That guy apparently does know what that is and felt the need to announce it to the audience. He wasn't the only leftist in the audience, I should say. There were a few others who, perhaps understandably, chose not to join the furry porn fan in his demonstration. Instead, they sat there at their desks, flipping me off at various points throughout my remarks, shaking their heads in disapproval, and finally storming out of the room. I actually didn't notice any of this that even was happening. I was told about it later. I didn't notice that they marched out. I just wasn't paying attention to them. The rest of the protesters were outside, being a bit more vocal and explicit. Of course, they marched around with signs accusing me of being a fascist, chanting that I was killing children somehow. They also reportedly chanted, "Trans rights are human rights," for literally 5 minutes straight, I was told. And as the attendees, people who were at my event, as they left, they were accosted by the protesters, cussing them out and calling them fascist as well. So to be clear, the audience members were fascists for simply listening to what I had to say. I mean, they didn't even all agree with me. They just listened. And so listening to someone else's point of view is now fascism. Because, of course, everything is fascism. At least, though, the protesters were, so that's kind of what you expect, fascist, FU, a lot of that kind of thing. The protesters were a bit more creative with this chant, though, and I did appreciate it. Play clip 2.
Matt can't swim! Matt can't swim! Matt can't can't swim! Matt can't swim! Matt can't swim! Matt can't swim! Matt can't swim!
Matt can't swim. I mean, first of all, that's a libelous accusation. I can swim, just very poorly. It's more of a treading water sort of thing, doggy paddle kind of situation. Enough that, you know, if one of my kids is drowning, I can jump in and save them, and I'm not going to drown alongside them. But that's about as far as I can go. I'm just not sure what any of that has to do with the topic at hand. I wonder what insult they'll come up with at my next event. Maybe they'll have a chant mocking me for the fact that I tend to overcook chicken breasts. Maybe claiming that I don't know how to fold fitted sheets. Both of those would be true, by the way. I don't mean to give them any ideas. In any case, perhaps the most instructive moment, I thought, came when one protester, who we should note put much less effort into his sign. I think it looks like he stole a dry erase board from one of the classrooms and just wrote on the dry erase board. There's some efficiency there, I guess. You can always change the message and everything, so I can appreciate that. I could have used a little bit more color, a little bit more flair in it. But he was asked by someone who was there. The Twitter account, by the way, is @rapidfire_pod is the person who has got this footage for proper attribution. Anyway, asked, like, what is it about, why are you here? Well, you know, you've got this sign. What is it that you don't like about this guy? What's the problem? And here's what he had to say.
I have a sign over here that says, Matt Walsh, TPUSA. Talk to us about the sign. Why is this important to you today?
Because I think Matt Walsh is an idiot and dangerous to people. And yeah, that's really all I have to say on that.
Number one thing Matt Walsh has said that's pissed you off, that made you hold up that sign today.
Oh God, I'd have to go back and look through his Twitter. I know I see all the time.
Just give me one. I mean, we're holding the Matt Walsh sign. Just give me one thing.
I mean, I know that Matt Walsh has consistently said that, trans women are not real women, trans men are not real men, when it's proven by science that trans women are in fact women, trans men are in fact men. It doesn't have to do with your born sex. It is that you feel like you are a woman, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to conform to what
society says.
Society
So
says.
if you decided that you wanted to identify as a woman today, is that something that we would label him as he's a woman at that point?
She's a woman.
She's a woman at that point. Got it. Got to use the correct pronouns. All right. So we've got women. Trans women aren't women. What about you?
Trans women are women.
Well, that Matt Walsh has said that has made us hold this sign today. What about you? What has Matt Walsh said?
Let's see. There's a lot of stuff about January 6th.
Mm-hmm.
Like, honestly, I get so confused with all these right-wing assholes. It's hard to keep track of who says what, but I know I've seen some stuff he said, and I know I wasn't a fan, so him.
Now, I love how he's making no attempt to project any confidence whatsoever about what he says. I don't like him because Matt Walsh is an idiot, I think, and dangerous, right? He's dangerous. That's what we're saying about him? Okay. He ends all of his statements like there's a question mark at the end, which, by the way, is a problem in general with young people today, if I might say. They all tend to speak as if the ends of their sentences all have question marks. But that's another matter. But listen, he knows he's seen some stuff. That's the point. And he knows he's seen some stuff that I've said, and it was not good stuff. And that's all he needs to know. And but most importantly, he knows that he's supposed to hate me. And so he does. Also, January 6th, he throws in there. Because everybody knows that I am a famous supporter of the Capitol riots. I was actually at the Capitol that day doing a tap dance on top of Nancy Pelosi's desk. I guess I shouldn't joke about that, or the feds are going to bust down the door any minute now. Anyway, he has no clue why I'm terrible. He just knows that I must be. The girl standing next to him, on the other hand, at least quotes me accurately. She is correct that I think trans women aren't women, because they aren't. She is, of course, incorrect in her claim that science proves otherwise, but 1 out of 2 ain't bad. Now, this all might seem pretty funny, and it is, no question about that. But what's the point of going into these environments and kicking at the hornet's nest like this? As I mentioned yesterday, my next stop is going to be at UNT, where they chased the last conservative speakers out of the room, forcing them to hide in a closet. That's where we'll be going next. Now, why would I want to go there, of all places? I mean, why do any of this? What's the point? Well, one reason to go to these places is that college campuses have become extremely hostile to the truth. Not just to open dialogue or to free speech or whatever, although it is hostile to that as well, of course. But for me, that's not the main point. The main point is the hostility to truth. And wherever the truth is least welcome is precisely the place where it's needed most. Those are the places where we should go. You know, if you're in an environment where everybody agrees, like everyone understands basic common sense things about biology and all of this, then some of these, you know, it's still important to reinforce the truth and to talk about it, but some of this wouldn't be needed. But it is because of this hostility to truth. So that's one reason. Another reason is that I'm frankly a stubborn, antagonistic kind of guy. And when people tell me that I can't say certain things or go certain places, it just makes me want to go those places and say those things even more. But the other even more important reason is that, as I've said before, and this is a very important thing for us all to grapple with, that there is no natural wake-up call coming for these kids. Okay? The conservatives who've comforted themselves with this notion that it's just a bunch of silly kids. They're going to get out into the real world and they'll wake up pretty fast. The conservatives who think that and have been saying this for forever, they're the ones who are in for a wake-up call. And I don't know why it hasn't happened yet for them. These kids who are allergic to basic truth, who chant fascist at anybody they disagree with, who hate people like me, even though they don't even know why they hate me, these kids will be entering a culture that is set up to keep them in that state of delusion, ignorance, and fear. Okay? It has a lot of older people are in that same state, as we've seen, especially over the last 2 years, but before that as well. And so we can't wait around for people to wake up. We have to go to them and wake them up, which means being a little aggressive and perhaps confrontational and even rude at times. Because the only other option is to let them and millions more remain stupefied and hypnotized forever. Because that's what will happen. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends.